July 2, 1943. The Castelvetrano, Sicily's airport. The Faller Wolf 190s. The pilot never saw the P-40 Warhawk go down. From above until gunfire tore, going through his belly and sending his planes circling towards the Sicilian. Here is the countryside. Officer First Class Charles B. Hall, who is 22 years old and from Brazil, Indiana, had just made a record of. German Luftwaffe leaders thought, not possible. Someone in black had shot down one of their best fighting planes. Painting a swastika on Hall's P-40L Warhawk. That afternoon would be the first of 112 enemy planes were shot down by the men. It was said that the Germans would come to. You can call Schwarzvogel the Black Birdman. During the Nazi era, racism theory put black people in the same category as mensch, subhuman, and unable to master complex machines or showing off courage in battle. The laws of Nuremberg had forbidden Germans from getting married, and people who are African still here. Above the air of the Mediterranean, that ideologies were about to clash incredibly badly with reality, as 992 pilots who were trained in Tuskegee, Alabama, would carefully tear down both German aeroplanes and German ideas about being whiter is better. The Lufthansa pilots didn't know as they rose to block American bombs in 1943 was that they were about to face some of the most strict fighter pilots who are well-trained and very driven in the whole U.S. Army Air Corps forces, men who had been through hard times their white counterparts never had to deal with, who had worked out longer and harder than, who were standard pilots and who carried into fight not only the weight of an job, but it's up to them to prove in whole race's abilities. The math behind air battle would soon be written in the sky over Europe. 15,000 military flights, 1,578, 112 air wins, missions, and a bomber protection loss rate is very high, less important than white fighting groups. Facts that would make even the most extreme Nazi believers to deal with the failure of their race. Thoughts. The path to that first aerial win didn't start in battle, but in the hostile climate of the United States. Separating them, the U.S. Army War College had released a study called Employment of African American Soldiers in the War That Ended. He is not like the white man at all. He is, without a doubt, mentally weak, inherently bad people. This, according to the official military report, that black men did not have the knowing things for professional jobs and the courage to lead in battle. Still, even leaders in the military held on to these. Because of racism, a small group of black Americans already showed them not right. Eugene Bullard had taken a plane for France in the First World War because not letting him serve. Bessie Coleman had become a pilot. France in 1921, when she could go to an American flight school. The Coffee School of Chicago had trained people in aeronautics. An unknown number of black private pilots shown that their flying skills knew no limits based on race. The stress for, as war clouds grew, change grew stronger, came together across Europe. Right to life. People in charge like Walter White of the Nelt, ACP, leader of the Labor Party, John Philip Randolph, and Judge William H. Hasty spoke out, pushing hard for black people to be included in military planes. Black news outlets, the Chicago Defender and the Pittsburgh. In Baltimore, the Afro-American Courier criticized the Roosevelt government with an easy question: how could the U.S. fights for freedom around the world while lying about it at home? On April 3, 1939, Public Law 18 finally let the door. It was Senator Harry H. Schwartz added a change that says the training program for private pilots to include at least one school named by the Authority for Civil Aviation for how to become a black air pilot. It was an unwilling admission dressed in, not ending racism, but it was a start. If Franklin D. Roosevelt had run for as in 1940, he won an unusual third term. Black votes in important northern cities. It was January 16, 1941, and Secretary Chief of War Henry L. Stimson told that when the 99th Pursuit Squadron was formed, an all-black air group, there was a catch to the news that showed what the military was expecting. It would be a test to do this. If black people could be taught as pilots in battle, Captain Benjamin O. Davis Jr. got it. The weight of being in charge when he led 26. Those who fly for the 99th Fighter Squadron to North Africa in April 1943. The son of the first black president of the United States. Davis had been a general for 4 years of. There was no noise at West Point, or no. The white cadet would talk to him outside of their official tasks. Now he told men what to do, who didn't just carry their own dreams, but the hopes of 13 million black people, U.S. citizens. It got to Farjuna, Tunisia, on the 99th, a part of the 33rd Fighter Group under Colonel William W. Mommy is a leader, who wasn't afraid to show his doubt about pilots of color. Mier gave them 2 missions to patrol over the Mediterranean, keeping them from what's really going on. He meant for them to fail, and when they didn't do well right away, he had his. Excuse me. In the early hours of June 2nd, 1943, it was their first mission in battle. In an attack on the island of Wearing Pants. As their old P-40 Warhawks flew higher, German jets moved towards their targets. Suddenly showed up. Those who flew Tuskegee. They held position, keeping their bombers. There were no lost planes on either. The Germans knew the first lesson. These pilots did not break when you're pushed. But things changed on July 2nd, 1943. Everything. Charles Hall was in the air with his 7th mission, which was to accompany B-25 Mitchell. Attacks by bombs on Castelvetrano. Sicily has an airport. 2 Fowler-Wolf 190s went straight for the group of bombers. Hall later said in court, I saw 2 Fowler-Wolves following the bombs right after. After the bombs went off, I went to There is room between the bombs and F-15s, and we're able to get inside Jerry's. I fired a long burst and saw my marks get into the second plane. He was going to the left, but falling all of a sudden. They took off and hit the ground hard. The whole base shook when Hall landed. Black workers on the ground who had months of comments from white people. The staff finally had an answer to every little thing. Hall's win was the first American black person to kill someone in the air. Pilot in the history of the U.S. Navy. By January, it had been 1944 when the 99th Fighter Squadron was in battle for 7 months, but Colonel Meyer had put in a terrible report saying they were not aggressive and suggesting that they be taken out of battle. We sent the report to General Henry Hap Arnold, who was getting ready to close down the try something. Then came Anzio. On January 27, 1944, huge raids were carried out by the Luftwaffe on Allied troops at the start of Anzio Beach. The 99th's pilots are using old P-40s. Came across better Fowler-Wolf 190s. What happened next over the battlefield would shut up the critics for good. 99th shot down several enemy planes. Several sources say between 8 and 13 people were killed. Over 2 days. Won 2 more games, taking his total to 3 in all. In 2 days, going. They had destroyed, poor tools, more enemy planes than they had in their 7 months of fighting before. The War Department started an investigation. When you look at the 99th against other P-40, and came to the conclusion that they were putting in work just as well as white units. Black pilots were able to do well at Anzio, could do well in battle if they had the chance. In May 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group, made up of the 99th, 100th, 3001st, and 3002nd Fighter Squadrons were told to do things that changed them from outsiders to heroes. They were going to join the 15th Air Force as a bomber follows, flying the long, dangerous trips deep into Nazi Germany. Colonel Benjamin Davis got together his aircraft at the Ramitelli Airport on the coast of Italy's Adriatic Sea. We can't afford to lose planes, he told them. Our job isn't to be an ace. Our job is to get those bombers back home. Would describe their way of fighting. No matter what, stay with the bombs. It was June 1944, and General Nathan Twining ordered a structured way to Mark IV. Each would get a soldier group. Different colors for instant name recognition. It was given the color red, but not just red. No eyes or red bands, but the whole tail. Parts of the P-51 were painted red. Mustangs with bright red tails. Spinners for the propellers and red nose bands. Came to be instantly recognizable. The first bomber teams to get red tail guards didn't know whom they were. The Guardians were black, and they only knew that these soldiers stayed close, leaving them to get easy kills, spread among the bombing groups. If you can get the red tails, ask for them. The red tails would be put to the test on July 18, 1944. Colonel Davis led 66 Mustangs will meet up with bombers again, aiming for the Luftwaffe base at Miming, France. The planes were not on time. Made an important choice. Orbit an enemy. Land instead of going back to base. When the planes finally showed up, about 100 people did the Luftwaffe. German soldiers coming from many directions. How to do it? It was known to the Germans that a huge number of people could break the red protective screen for tails. Even though the 332nd put up a strong defense, won 11-12 battles, and 15 B-17s were destroyed to enemy fighters in 20 minutes of fierce battle. The 332nd lost 3 captains and lieutenants. Robert Hutton. There was Wellington Irving and Alfred Brown. Some people said the high number of bomber deaths showed black pilots couldn't handle. There were big fights, but operational analysis. The 332nd had shown the truth. Got into a problem that couldn't be fixed with. Huge German forces are already fighting. The bombs. They had stopped the whole. Bad luck. It was March 1945 when the Luftwaffe's normal fighters could at most threaten the Allies' control of the air. France had one more card, though. The Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first plane that could fly. Battleship. It can go as fast as 540 miles per hour. Could run faster than any propeller-driven a plane. There was a 332nd Fighter Group on March 24, 1945. The group got its most difficult duty, accompany planes 1,600 miles. Trip all the way to Berlin to attack the Daimler-Benz workshop for making tanks. They were told that Mi-262s from Yagashita 7. They would protect the target, Colonel Davis said. Took 43 P-51 Mustangs into the heart of the Reich. As they got closer to Berlin, the biggest jet fighter, the Mi-262, showed up. Force ever put together for a single. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown had a catch. Looked into the jet's flaws. We knew the F-16s were faster then. Then instead of going straight after, we got away from them, and then he moved into their weak spots. Brown shot down one Mi-262, he said. They said, I pulled up on him in a 15 degrees climb and fired 3 long shots from 2,000 feet at 8 o'clock to him. Almost. Right away, the pilot bailed out of about 24,500 foot. What did Lieutenant Earl Lane do? Many people thought it was impossible. Shooting. Put a 2,000-yard bomb on a Mi-262. Ricochet shot with the brand new K-14 computer sight for gun. It was Lieutenant Charles Brantley who said that. That day was the 3rd jet win. Taking out 3 Mi-262s in one attack. There were more jets in the battle than most groups of fighters would destroy in the whole war. The Red Tails had just finished. More than the sum of all the previous. The American Mi-262 kills in one afternoon. Was given to the 332nd Fighter Group. A citation for this notable unit. My job. Not every meeting between Tuskegee pilots and Germans came to an end in victory. 32 pilots were taken prisoner of war, and what their experiences showed. Many complicated relations between Nazi ideology and the fact of war. It was shot at Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson, down on August 12, 1944, while he was on the 19th mission. People didn't like his P-51. Southern France, while using radar to strafe settings up. He was questioned by the German officer. Had a lot of information about a group of 332 fighters. The person who was questioning knew about. This is about our group and Ramitelli Airfield. Leaders, and even information about their house in Detroit, Jefferson. Brought up. He knew that my dad was a teacher and the family name of my mother. It was scary how smart they were. Careful. The things Jefferson found inside Stalag Luft 3 got treated the same as every other American officer. White jacket crew PSWs often came up to him to thank him for red tail defense. When these things happen, couldn't happen in racist America. Happened naturally in a German prison camps. People saw the irony. John Adams. I was in a Nazi prison camp, getting more fair treatment by white. I am more American than I was at home. When the war was over, Jefferson. When he got back to the U.S., he was right away separated at the point of disembarkation. And while German pilots were said to have seen the red telltale skill with the name, the American bomber Schwarze Vogel mentioned, it was the workers who spoke out most for them. These guys who were in danger of dying every. It didn't matter what race someone was, only getting by. Bomber teams came up with their own stories about the red tails. Stories spread about how unique they were, the way they flew and how they moved their wings to say hello, their tight forms and their refusal to give up. Bombers were damaged. Angels with red tails turned into the bomber crew's name for them. The statistics backed up the bomber teams' personal tastes. Study by the Air Force. The scholar Dr. Daniel Holman said that fighters from the 332nd Fighter Group Guard only lost 27 planes to the enemy fights compared to 46 on average for other 15th Air Force P-51 groups. Force. This better rate of protection happened even though the red tails were flying some of the longest and most risky tasks of the war. By the end of the war, the Tuskegee pilots had put together a battle record that blew away every pre-war idea about the black troops. The ability. Operations in battle, 1,578. Flew tasks in combat, 15,000 or more. Each sortie was finished. 179 flights with bombers as guards. 311 jobs to do. For the 15th Air Force. Enemy planes. Destroyed. 112 enemy planes were destroyed. In battles in the sky, 150 enemy planes were shot down on the ground. 9 Mi-262 fighter jets were shot down. On March 24, 1945, 950 train cars were destroyed by ground targets. Vehicles, such as trucks and cars, 254. Engines for trains. TA-22. Just Missouri, a former Italian warship, broken beyond repair on June 25, 1944. Record number of 27 planes lost to enemy fighters compared to 46 on average for different groups. Better safety rate. Kept up over 179 escort flights. Highlights of individual work. Lee Archer. For wins are certain. For wins for Joseph Elberry, such as 3 FW-19s on July 12, 1944. For wins for Edward Toppins. Clarence Lewister, 3 kills and 1 duty on July 18, 1944. Awards and decorations for 96 outstanding. The 332nd Fighter Group has flying crosses, 744 air medals, 14 bronze stars. There are 8 Purple Hearts and 3 unique unit awards for the 99th Fighter Squadron, 1 well-known unit. A note about the 332nd Fighter Group. Cost and lives. 66 pilots were killed in action. 32 planes were taken prisoner of war. 84 killed in training and other situations. Missions. How things changed from. It wasn't just about making fun of respect. Bravery. It showed that Americans were better. Methods of teaching and technology. The Red Tails had benefits with. Specifics. More flights were made at Tuskegee. Hours longer than white people, 300. 200 white pilots were killed. They obsessed over practicing pattern flying. Being aware of that in battle would be what makes them different. The rate of washout at. It was 60% for Tuskegee and 40% for cadets in white. Only the best made it through the program, making what? Colonel Noel Parrish, who led the Tuskegees, also known as a super-selected group. The order of the different types of airplanes told. It has its own story. The 99th began with used P-40 Warhawks already. Out of date when they got to North Africa. These liquids kept Allison cool. German engine fighters were better. Bf-19s and FW-19s. In almost every measure of success. Still, the P-40s were used by the Tuskegee pilots. Better ability to turn and tough. Building to stand on their own. When the P-51 Mustangs arrived in July 1944, raised the Red Tails to the level of any Army unit in the war. The North. The American P-51D Mustang stood for. American industry is great. It had a top-notch Packard-built Merlin engine, 437 miles per hour. Its 650 Beta-M machine guns could defeat any planes. That's why its spread of more than 1,600 M with drop tanks, which let it accompany. Bombers could go anywhere in the Reich. Behind those who shot down a German plane, dozens of planes stood by to help. Staff. engineers, armorers, and crew. Chiefs who made sure the Red Tails could fly. There were about 16,000 Tuskegee pilots who served. Not quite 1,000 were pilots. The rest of them were the unsung stars who made it possible to win. The teams on the ground did amazing things with not enough tools. The Ramitelli Airport. It was very basic in Italy compared to other American bases. Spare parts were hard to find. The 332nd is usually last in line for supplies. Still, their planes' access rate, which is the share of planes ready to fight, equaled or more than that of white units. These ground teams had to deal with battle too. English attacks on Ramitelli were not common, but lethal. A German ship sank on March 24, 1944. A bombing raid killed a number of support. The staff. The guys kept going. During the attack, pulling planes. Stay away from fuel dumps that are on fire. A planned bombing assault over Europe offered the best place to test for the Tuskegee Army Airmen. Each B-17 in the air. The fortress cost $238,000. It had 10 highly skilled crew people. The loss of one bomber showed a loss in strategy that affected every part of the war effort. This is why protecting against bombs was important, more than wins in the air. Colonel Davis knew this when he gave the order. He told his pilots to fight the urge to go after German troops. Anyone can shoot, kill a fighter if they give up their post, he said. It takes self-control to when the enemy is running. The Red Tails use protection strategies, have changed through experience. They built a defense with 3 layers. Close, dancing escort right above the bombers. Medium-sized escorts were set up to intercept jets coming in, and high escort looking out for threats by diving. This system needed careful planning and strict discipline. The Tuskegee soldiers in the air fought 2 wars at the same time against. There is fascism in other countries and racism in our own. There, the battle record pushed both Nazi ideas about race and American segregation, showing that top-notch aerial battles were not based on race, sorting into groups. While Tuskegee soldiers in the air fought the Germans, they fought against racism at home and abroad. Their wins over the Luftwaffe made the front pages of black newspapers, but not given enough attention or ignored by the mainstream media. How the Pittsburgh Courier's mission with 2 versus victory against racism and fascism at home and abroad used the Tuskegee Airmen as a model for their own. Some examples. The difference between German understanding and stark. By 1945, the Luftwaffe was said to have knew for sure who flew the red-tailed Mustangs, which they called Schwarze. Not a good idea. At the same time, many white Americans didn't. I knew there were black pilots. This ignorance was on purpose. The battle department rarely told the public about what the Tuskegee Airmen did well. Success in Europe did not bring happiness, but there was doubt for the Tuskegee Airmen. While white units got ready to win, the 332nd was asked about parades. For the future, the Army Air Forces planned to keep division in place despite fight proof of how silly it is. 4. Many years after World War II, what the Tuskegee Airmen did well stayed mostly unknown to most people. America. Some pilots had a hard time with this erasure. Lee Archer with his worked as a boss for 4 wins, but didn't talk much about his time in the war. Nobody believed me anyway, he said. Hey, the black jet pilot must be telling the truth. In 1948, Harry Truman signed the Order 9981 of the executive, bringing together the U.S. troops, a choice. Because of the Tuskegee Airmen's performance in battle, Ben Davis, who was in charge of the Red Tails over Berlin, turned into the air. In 1954, he became the first black general in the force. Slowly, people began to notice. In 2007, the President George W. Bush Congress gave the Tuskegee men a gold medal. Airmen. 300 of the original planes made it back to safety. To go. Many had to wait more than 60 years. For getting national attention. The change from making fun of to respecting. It wasn't legend, it was proven fact. The facts can't be argued with. 112 wins in the air against the Air Force. It has 3 Mi-262 jet fighters. Destroyed in a single task. 150 enemy planes were shot down on the ground. Against 46, 27 bombs were lost. What other groups have found? 96. Well-known flying crosses won by pilots in the 332nd Fighter Group. The allegedly known as Schwarzervogel. Bringing it up showed that bias falls apart when facing facts that can't be denied. The ability. Every German soldier killed, every flight with a bomber protected. Finished, added proof to win. Without a doubt. What color are pilots? His skin had nothing to do with his power to fight and fly. Roscoe Brown, who shot, bringing down a German plane over Berlin, summarized what they had done. There was more than one enemy we fought. We fought against ignorance, bias, and hate. We won every single fight. The Tuskegee boys hadn't just won, though. Fights. They changed the past. They fought and won 3 wars at the same time. All of them. Beating the Luftwaffe in, fighting and opposing Nazi ideas about race. Through acting, and in the end, working to end segregation in the United States. Due to obvious excellence. When they had the chance, the Tuskegee. As the pilots flew, mockery turned into respect, bias into acceptance, and enemies into witnesses of their. An amazing accomplishment.